In this lecture, we loop over an array for each method. Now we have already learned how to overloop an array using the for-of loop, but for each method is really fundamentally different from now. From now on, we'll start working with our bank account data. So which is here in this starter file. So we can just go ahead and grab this, remove from there, and then here we'll just paste it. So let's say that we wanted to loop over this movements array. So in order to print a message for each movement in the bank account, so these positive values here are basically deposits and the negative values are withdrawals. And we can print something to the console saying that the user deposited or whether withdraws some money. So let's actually start by doing that for-of loop. So here we just say moment greater than 0, then console.log you deposited and else console.log. So we use this math function here within the absolute value to removing your negative signs here. So we'll just say here math dot so that it removes this negative value signs, and after the dot when we save this, as you can see here, we got our output saying. So let me just make this bigger screen here. So as you can see here, you deposited, so which is this one we are getting, you withdrawal and deposits. Okay, of course this solution here works perfect, but now let's finally learn how to use the for each method to achieve that exact same thing, but in my opinion in an easier way. So to loop over the movements array, we use for each. So here we'll write our code for that. So before that, we'll just say console or log here. We'll just say for each, and also here we are writing the code for each, and here we'll just say movements dot for each. So as you can see here, it is case sensitive. Always here you should say here the E should be capital, so don't forget that. And then here in this function call, you can just say movement and here we'll just copy this if and else statement from the previous. Okay, we'll just copy that and paste. So when we run it, as you can see here, so here also we got the same output. Okay, and now with the capital E, like I said, don't forget this here for each. Okay, and then the for each method actually requires a callback function here. So for each is technically a high order function, as we learned in the last section, which requires a callback function in order to tell it what to do. So it's the for each method here that will call this callback function. We are not calling it ourselves as always, and that's of course important to keep in mind once again. But when exactly will for each actually call this callback function? Well, the for each method does is to overloop the array. In each iteration it will execute the callback function here. Also for each method calls this callback function. In each iteration it will pass the current element of the array as an argument, and we can specify that here as an array of as an argument. So which we got here the same results. So we got so we get ourselves more space, and yeah, And that's essentially how the for each method works. Basically, behind the scenes, in iteration 0, it will call the function here, and so anonymous function in this case without a name. So let's just call this function. So let me just show you here by writing this here. So in the initial phase here, it is saying the function of 200. So, and also in the next case, here it is just calling the function of which is 450, and also it goes on to till the end. So in the second case here it is the function of 400. So this ways it goes all the way till the last element here. Okay, and this part of for each function here passing in the current element of the array here like this and this and this. Okay, especially important to understand. So basically this is exactly the concept that I explained in the last section when I said I want to call back a function to tell another higher order function exactly what I should do. So in this case we tell for each in each iteration it should log one of these two strings here to the console. Okay, so we give the for each method instructions by giving it a callback function which contains these instructions here. Okay, right, and I really know and understand this is a quite hard concept to wrap around your head, but if you just continue using this from now on, then eventually it will start make sense. Now anyway, well, I think that we can both agree that for each method, right? Maybe you don't agree with me, and of course that's okay. As I keep mentioning, it is always good to develop your own style of programming, but using the for each method here and especially understanding the logic behind it here with the callback function, it is really important for other methods that we are going to learn later. Anyway, let's now learn some more stuff about the for each method because we are not done yet. So what if we actually needed access to a counter variable here? So just like we can access the current index of the array here in the for of loop. So remember how we did that for of. So let's just write, so let me just write that here. So in the for of, for now I'm just turning here this off. So let me just show you here. So here instead of for, here I am writing constant movement. So here constant movement of movements dot entries. So here instead of movement, here we have to write our indexes, right? So here we'll just say index I, and then here we'll just say the movement. Okay, and then also here we'll just say that movement of I plus 1. Okay, and we'll just simply copy this and then we'll just paste it here as well. Okay, so what do you think the output is going to be when we run this? As you can see here, you can notice, see how good it looks right now. So what happened here is this line here, so it returns the array of arrays. Remember, when it's the first position contains the current index and the value itself. This is how we access the counter variable in for of loop. Then we could say that this console.log, so then it gets executed here, and it looks a lot more nicer with this number of movement here. And so let's now do the same for the for each method, which is lot more easier, and let's try to understand how it works in here. Okay, so remember once that is for each method who calls the callback function in each iteration, as it calls this function it also passes the current element of the array, but actually that's not all the passes. In fact, for each passes in current element, the index and the entire array that we are looping, and so therefore we can specify them in our parameters list. So let me just show you how we can do that here. So instead of here movements, here you can just simply add here the one more called index, and then here array. Okay. Now, of course, we can just use one like here being doing, or we can just use here the two, or we can just here use the three all together. As always, the names here doesn't matter at all, but what matters here is the order. So the first one here is going to be the parameter always. So it is the parameters of the current element. Okay. And the second parameter, which is always the current index, and the third one here will be always the entire array. So we are looping over because that's the order in which the arguments so actually are passed into our callback function. Okay. So here, for suppose I don't want to just mention here movements, let me just say here move, so which is the short form of movement. So we'll just edit in everywhere and here also. Okay. So when we run this, see here we get the exactly same output, and now if you want, you can just simply change here to this move, and just I want to say here I, and then let me just keep it here the array, and let me just copy this here movements. So similarly like this we are just going to do here in the same way, right? So space. So here we have the I, so that is why here we have declared here the I. So if we keep here index and here if we declare I, it doesn't work. So the values needs to be same. See here it executed perfectly. So you might ask me a question. So which method to use, the for each or for loop? Well, coming down, it's your personal preference. So every programming language has always many different ways of tools to achieve the same thing, especially as more things keep getting added to the language, there will always be more options to achieve the same result. All right. So let's wrap this session. So in this, my opinion, this is a really brilliant and powerful mechanism, but I know it's also rather complex to wrap your head around this. So it will become more obvious with the practice once you understand exactly how this works. So especially this mechanism of this callback here, as you can see, this one, this callback, all this one, and of this passing arguments into the callback here. And once you understand all this fundamental mechanism, then working with all other array methods in this session will become really easy, because most of them will follow this exact same principle of this callback function that we just explored here. So please review this lecture carefully, and yeah, if you understand this role of callback function here, then let's just move on to the next video. That's it for this video.